Hey, welcome. I'm going to build the SunFounder PiCar-V over the next 75 minutes. I wanted to do a project like this ever since I saw a documentary about DARPA's Grand Challenge about 15 years ago, where they required a car to drive itself across a stretch of desert. Fastest to arrive at the destination won. The team from Stanford, led by Sebastian Thrun, won the challenge in 2005. It took a while for the technology to be affordable enough for an individual to do this on a small scale. So here we are. I chose the PiCar-V because it's a platform that provides good basic qualities and is easy to expand. Out of the box, the PiCar-V comes only with a video camera, but you can add other sensors to enhance the car's capabilities. The software has basic remote control navigation running as a web server on a Raspberry Pi. The Pi is a good choice because it supports a tremendous amount of software and hardware expansion, enough to expand it into an autonomous car that can navigate around the house by voice command, which is my ultimate goal for this project. But let's get the kit assembled first. Autonomous driving will be for another video. Let's get started with opening the box. The instruction manual is quite good, even though there are some grammar issues. So here we have the chassis and some of the steering plates and all of that. There's a bunch of fasteners and standoff, just hardware. During the build, it'll be important to use the right size in each step, so pay attention to that. They're all various thickness and length. We got the wheels. Front and back are different. So when we pick them up for assembly, we'll have to look at that. There's cable management. That's the motor driver. We got the camera. We got the robot hats, which will clip on to the Raspberry Pi. Bunch of cables that we'll use to tie all of the printed circuit boards together. Those are the servos. There's 3 of those, and then there's 2 DC motors with the yellow gearbox and the PWM board, the pulse width modulation board, which sits between the robot hats and all the motors. And then there's a bunch of tools. It's handy to have a screwdriver that's slightly bigger and also one that's slightly smaller for some of the screws. There's also the battery holder, and there's a blue ribbon that we'll use later. I just can't find it right now, but we'll need it later. That's it for the kit. You'll also need at least 2 18650 batteries and a charger. They're about the same size as AA's, but they're not the same. So they're lithium, they're higher discharge, specifically need those. Finally, you'll need a Raspberry Pi with Wi-Fi capability and a micro SD card for permanent storage. I got the Pi 4B with a 64 gigabyte micro SD. So I got plenty of spare cycles and capacity because I want to do image processing for localization after the basic kit is built. I assume that you already worked with the Raspberry Pi and that you have Raspbian set up. Raspbian is a version of Linux specifically for the Pi. The full version comes with Python, which will need, and also a VNC server, which you should enable. There are many different ways to install Raspbian and plenty of tutorials on how to do it, so I haven't included that in my video. If you don't have Raspbian installed yet, do that now. Make sure you have a fixed IP address, which will make it easier to connect to your car over Wi-Fi later. I also assume that you have Python 3.6 installed on your PC. We'll need that when we test and calibrate the finished car towards the end of the video. All right, let's clear some space and start the build. I lay out all the pieces so I can find them easily. We're going to start with the front of the car. First, the wheels. So we got the wheels there. Some M4 self-locking nuts, M4 by 25 screws, we got the two steering connector plates, the little things with the hooks on them there. And we're gonna need two bearings. There's 4 of them, but we only need 2 right now. And then we got all these little gasket plates, 3 hex ones, 3 hex fixing plates, and round gasket plates. So we'll grab the steering connector. I'm going to attach the steering connector plate using an M4 by 25 screw through the flange bearing, the steering connector plate, then 3 of the round gasket plates, and 3 of the hex fixing plates. And then the wheel, the M4 self-locking nut goes on last on the outside of the wheel. You gotta tighten that firmly. Takes a little bit. I started with a little screwdriver, but actually switched to a slightly bigger one to give me more leverage. Even after tightening completely, you'll see that the wheel is still a little bit wobbly around the plate, and that's normal. For the second wheel, you do the same thing, but pay attention, the little hooks on the connector plate, they point in opposite directions because the whole assembly will be symmetrical, so you gotta make sure the hooks either both point inward or outward when you place the wheels next to each other. There we go. All right, next we're going to put the rocker arms from the servos on the pan and tilt mechanism for the camera. So we need 2 of the cross rocker arms. those out of the bag here. We got a couple of the servos, which we'll put to the side for now. That was the base plate. Second rocker arm that we need. And that's the camera mounting plate. Right, we'll grab the base plate and put a cross rocker on there. The plate's symmetrical, so it doesn't matter which side, but do pay attention to the orientation of the arms and also which side you put the screws in once you decide where to put the cross rocker. The screws are a bit tricky, they're so tiny. But at the same time, it's kind of tight, so you gotta be gentle and forceful at the same time. Okay, that's one done. The other one goes on the camera mounting plate, on the outside of it, and it's mounted diagonally. Watch the direction of the arms in relation to the plate. Okay, second one's done. I'm going to put those aside for a little bit. They'll come back in at the end when we finish. Now we need the pan and tilt plate, the one with the big openings. We're going to mount two of the servos there, and we're going to use M2x8 screws and M2 nuts to secure them. You have to pay attention again to the orientation here and the relative position of the servos with respect to the plate. They kind of sit one below the other snugly like that. Okay, let me grab the M2x8 screws. And the M2 nuts. There we go. And retighten those. As you can see, it helps to have your screwdriver magnetized a little bit. That way the screws stick to them. That's number 2. And there goes the other servo. Look at the orientation of the shafts. They're sticking out. And the wires are on the same side. Now we'll take the steering linkage and we're going to attach our one arm, rocker arm to that. Let me get that one arm rocker. There we go. And we'll use one of the longer screws from the rocker arm package. And we'll put it in the last available hole on the one arm rocker. All right. Again, these screws are kind of tiny, but also tight, so it's kind of tricky to get that right. But there it is. Okay, we'll put that aside. Again, it won't come in till the end of the build. Clean up a little bit. Okay, ready for the next phase. We got the chassis there. We'll need some standoffs. We'll need 4 of the shorter ones, M2.5 by 8 copper standoffs, and M2.5 nuts that go with it. All right. standoffs are going to go on the side with the protruding tabs, which is considered the top side. There's several holes because we'll place more items and screws in later. So pay attention that you put these in the right position. We're going to be mounting the printed circuit boards in the Raspberry Pi on those in a later stage. So it's important that you get them into the right holes. It's not completely symmetrical, as you can see. All right, that's done. Give them all a quick tightening. Make sure they're secure. Then grabbing my ribbon, the blue ribbon, I found it, and you got to cut that lengthwise. It'll be used to pop the batteries out when they need recharging. So you have to thread each ribbon through the slots that are there, leaving ends of unequal length on the bottom side of the plate. You're kind of snaking them through. Like so. There we go, that's one. And the one end is longer and the other one is short. And then the same with the other one. Okay, then we're grabbing a battery holder. I'm going to mount that to the bottom. The wire points in that specific direction. Make it easier for cable management later. We're going to use countersunk screws for this, M3x8 countersunk screws, and some M3 nuts to go with it. We'll need 2 of those. That's one. Oops. And there's the second one. Give them a quick tightening. Okay, there we go. That's done. Looking good. Now, let's get 4 of the M3x25 standoffs, the big ones. And some M3x8 screws. I'm putting those at the rear and bottom of the main chassis plate. Again, there's multiple holes. Make sure you get the right ones. That's 2. And the 3rd one. And one more. And tighten those all up. And there we are. They're ready to mount the printed circuit boards next. Okay. We'll do the Raspberry Pi first. Get that out of its box. There it is. I'm going to use the other M2.5x8 copper standoffs to mount it to the existing M2.5x8 standoffs. Pay attention to the orientation of the Pi. You want the USB on the left. All right, tighten those all up. Okay, next we'll put those away and we'll PCB. There it is. Pop that right on. And we'll secure it with 4 M2.5 by 6 screws. That's 3 and 4. Okay, next we're going to put on the PCA 9685 pulse width modulation board, PWM for short. It's going to sit on top of the pushed out tabs just behind the hats board. And it's secured with 4 M2.5 by 12 screws and matching M2.5 nuts. And there's the board. When you put that on, make sure you even out how far you tighten the screws so that the PWM sits horizontally and isn't skewed. Okay, once it's nicely horizontal and the board is touching the tabs flat, you can tighten all the screws. There's 1, 2, and that's going to go behind the PWM and mount it the same way on those protruding tabs. We'll also use 4 M2.5 by 12 screws and matching nuts for that. All right, tighten that. There we go. That's all the PCBs. Then I'm getting the DC gear motors. After moving that out of the way, there's one DC gear motor. The gearboxes are the yellow things at the end. Don't need the front plate yet. Here's the rear plate with 2 vertical tabs where we're going to mount the motors. We'll need 4 M3 nuts. And 4 M3 by 25 screws. Right, make sure the wires go toward the middle with the gearbox part forward pointing and the motor part backward pointing. If you can keep the wires pointing towards the end of the car, towards the motor end, which is opposite of what I've actually done, it'll save you some fidgeting later on. All right, second one. Tighten those good. All right, looks good. That's now ready to be mounted to the bigger plate on the large standoffs installed earlier with 4 more M3 nuts. Put those ready. Right, let me turn that upside down. And you can see the 4 large standoffs. I'm going to put the rear wheel assembly on it, or on those. The motor part going backwards. And secure that with the M3 nuts. Tighten those all up. There we go. All right, it's coming together nicely. Yeah, you really want those on the other side. Okay, let's put on the rear wheels. You have to line up the hole with a notched axle, just so. And then push once it's aligned. Push with increasing force until you feel the wheel starts to slide onto the axle. It's a bit tricky because you're always afraid that you're going to push too hard and you end up not pushing hard enough. It actually helps to put a finger behind the yellow gear housing for leverage. Okay, the rear wheels are on. Make some space. And let's get ready to connect the wires. I'll lay them all out so that we can grab them easily later. I'm going to do the battery wire first. Comes from the battery holder and goes to the HATS PCB. Okay. Then, using a short 2-wire, male-to-male, we'll connect the HATS to the PWM. Where you plug in the wire is critical, so look at it a few times. Okay, when you're sure you've positioned them correctly, push until it clicks. Next, we'll connect a 5-wire male-to-male between the hats and the motor driver. There's only one connection pair where this wire fits, but you got to make sure to have the colors in the right order. The wires are barely long enough, so it's a little tricky. So you got the white wire on the left and the black wire on the right. Now the 4-wire male-male goes between the hats and PWM. Again, use the right slot and make sure the colors match up as shown. Here the white wires are forward and the black one is back. Okay, next we use a 2-wire male to female to connect the motor driver to the PWM. The motor driver gets the male end. Female end goes to the rightmost 2 yellow pins on the second from right block of pins on the PWM. There we go, so it's in the yellow pins. Second block, and the 2 rightmost. Now we're going to hook up the servos. Start with the pan and tilt camera servo assembly that we did earlier. Doing the tilt servo, the top one, first. It goes to the rightmost block on the PWM. Second set of pins from the left on that block. We connect yellow to yellow, orange to orange, and brown to black. And then the other servo goes right next to it on that same rightmost block. There we go. Finally, we grab the steering servo, and that's going to connect to the rightmost pins on that same rightmost block. paying attention to the colors. There we go. Next is going to be the motor wires. They have to come out the back of the car. So I have to pull them through if they're not already there. And you connect those to the motor driver in the back. Right motor to the right side, left motor to the left side. Okay, that's all the wires done. Before we finish assembling, we need to check and configure the servos. The servos are all software controlled, so we're going to do some software installation now. To do that, we need to fire up the Raspberry Pi, so I install freshly charged batteries. First one, click that in. All right, number two. And first power. We got lights. It's got to be good. Let me put some temporary arms on the servos so we can see their movement. We're going to remove those again later. It's a little bit easier to see the servos turn when you have a little arm put on them. So we'll just loosely put that on, not tighten it. Okay. Now we're going to connect to the car using VNC. I use the VNC Connect client from my PC. There we go. That's the Raspberry Pi. I'm going to open a command window and we're going to install some PiCar specific software that SunFounder provides on Git. So we're going to git clone from SunFounder / SunFounder _ PiCar-V .git. That's cloning. And done. We'll switch into that directory. And let's see what's there. We'll sudo / install dependencies. We got Django installing, various other components. That's done. We'll reboot, yes. And obviously we lose connection. But we'll go right back in after the reboot is done. All right, we're back in. Command window is up. and we go back into the SunFounder PiCar-V directory. And we'll run PiCar servo install. And you can see the servos moving right there. So they're calibrating, set to 90-degree angles. All right, Control C out of that. And we're done, so the servos are working. We won't need the temporary arms anymore, so let me remove those. All right, and then we'll get rid of that. Put the steering servo, the one that's still by itself, put that in the front hole. Pointing downwards, and we'll use two M2x8 screws and matching M2 nuts. Watch the servo wire, it should be pointing forward. Okay. Tighten those up. Then we grab the steering arm and attach that steering rocker arm to the servo. And I'll secure that with one of the little screws from the servo package. Next, grab the front half lower chassis and the front wheels. And then we're going to need the other 4 M3x25 standoffs, the big ones. And M3 nuts, there they are. Secure the standoffs to the plates and tighten. Okay, now this is a bit tricky. Going to put the hooks from the wheel flanges into the steering arm and the chassis. The front hook goes in the steering arm, and the other little tab goes into the hole on the chassis. It kind of sits there a little bit precariously in the hole in the chassis, and in the hook in the steering arm. And then the front half chassis plate goes on top of that, or below it, I should say. And get M3x8 screws to secure them. The wheels may pop out of the holes that you put them in earlier. So put on a little pressure to squeeze them in place and then tighten the screws. Second screw, oops. Popped out, you'll have to pop it right back in. As you're doing this, just make sure that you don't turn the servo manually. So even though I'm moving the wheel here, I try not to actually move the steering arm so that I don't break the servo. Like I said, it's a bit tricky. The wheels are a little bit wobbly, and that's normal. All right, once it's all in place, we're going to tighten them. All right, tighten the last one. And then the screws in the back, they go in last. Okay, like I said, a little wobbly, but that's good. Then the camera is going to be next. Get the camera mount plate. Remove the temporary arms from that. That set of servos, so that we can mount the permanent rocker arms that are already attached to the tilt base plate and the camera plate. So here's the camera mount plate. That one goes first. It goes to the top servo. That's the tilt servo. And get one of those little screws to tighten that. Orientation is important, so pay attention to how the orientation of the camera mount plate is with respect to the servos. This is where the little screwdriver comes in handy. Okay. Now I'm taking the pan and tilt base plate. There we go. And that's going on the other servo. Again, paying attention to the orientation. Squeeze that on. Okay, and secure that with another one of those little screws. Okay, that's ready to attach to the chassis now. It's going to go in front of the steering servo. And use two M3x10 screws. And matching nuts. All right, that's one tightened. There goes number two. Now grab the camera, and we're going to mount that to that front of the camera mounting plate with the little clip. Extend the wire a little bit, open the clip, and it snaps right on. Again, while you're doing this, make sure you don't turn the servos because you may break them. And then grab the USB and plug it into the USB port. All right, that's it. The assembly is complete. Congratulations. We got some software stuff to do, but that's all of the assembly steps done. Okay, finally, we need to test and calibrate all the motors and the servos. For that, we'll need to install a bit more software. Opening up a DOS window. Like I said, I'm assuming you already have Python. We're doing a pip3 install PiQt5, which we'll need to install the client. And then we also need to install the requests package, which I happen to already have. Then we're gonna download some more software from SunFounder from Git. Do that directly from our browser and go to github.com/SunFounder_PiCar-V. Navigate there, and we will clone or download, and that's downloading. All right, and then we'll head back into the PiCar via VNC. There we are. Now it's time to start the server that we installed on the car earlier. So we open up a command window, switch to the SunFounder PiCar-V /remote control directory, and go /start. The car is now ready to accept commands. I'm going to lift the rear wheels so it doesn't drive off my desk as I calibrate the motors. Then back at the PC, we go to the directory we unzipped and enter the client subdirectory under SunFounder_PiCar-V-master. Right click on the client.py file, select Edit with Idle option. Once you're in the file, select Run Module from the Run menu. That gets me to the prompt to log into the car. This is where it's handy to have the fixed IP address for the Raspberry Pi when you first install the Raspbian on it. I'm connecting and I get the view from the camera of the car. Select Settings in the lower right, get to the calibration menu. I'm doing the camera one first. Following the instructions on the screen to get the position correct and test, and you can see things move and end up in a horizontal position. Then I'll do the front wheels. I use the arrow keys to adjust the position so it's straight, and test and see it turn left and right. And then finally we go to the rear wheels, and they'll start turning. Make sure they're both going forward. Use the arrow keys as indicated if they don't. And once they're both going forward, you click OK. All right, that's it. The car is ready. It can be accessed from a browser, any browser, including on your phone or iPads, at http:/, the car's IP address, :8000, which is a port, and then where you can control it remotely. Here we go, a little demo. I hope you enjoyed watching. Now working on expanding the capabilities of the car by programming it to recognize where it is based on images from my house that it sees through the camera. Also installing an ultrasound distance sensor for collision avoidance. And when I'm done with that project, I'll do another video. In the meantime, enjoy what we have so far. And goodbye from JD Code Lab.